The station was already dying when Kaeldar understood what terror truly was. Metal walls shook as explosions rolled through the broken corridors. Emergency lights flashed red, then went dark, then returned again like a weak heartbeat. Smoke drifted in slow clouds, mixing with the thin air. Somewhere far away, something massive tore itself apart, and the sound traveled through the station like a scream that would not end. Kaeldar floated near a shattered doorway, his magnetic boots locked to the floor. His 4 eyes scanned the hallway ahead. Enemy drones moved in the distance, their sharp shapes cutting through the smoke. His pulse raced. He had fought in many wars before. He knew fear. He knew survival. But this battle was different. Behind him were the humans. They were pressed against the wall, weapons raised, breathing hard. Their armor was scratched and blackened, some of it cracked open. One human had blood floating from a wound in his shoulder, drifting like red mist in the low gravity. Another human's helmet was gone, his face pale and calm, eyes focused forward. The station alarms suddenly cut out. Silence fell thick and heavy. Kaeldar activated his communicator. "We are surrounded," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We should retreat to the inner ring. We still have a chance." The humans did not answer right away. Instead, one of them laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, strange and almost out of place. Kaeldar turned his head, confused. The human who laughed was tall, his armor marked with deep burns. His name tag read Mason. "No retreat," Mason said softly. "No time." Another human, a smaller one named Alvarez, checked her weapon. Her hands shook for just a moment, then steadied. "They think we're trapped," she said. "That's their mistake." Kaeldar felt a chill run through his body. His species believed fear was something to control and hide. Humans did not hide it. They carried it openly, and somehow turned it into something sharp. The enemy drones moved closer, their weapons powered up, glowing blue in the dark. Kaeldar's instincts screamed at him to flee. The humans stepped forward. "Positions," Mason said calmly, like he was calling for a routine drill. Kaeldar stared at them. "You will die," he said. "There are too many." Mason glanced back at him. His face was tired, his eyes red, but there was no panic there, only focus. "Yeah," Mason replied. "Probably." That word struck Kaeldar harder than any explosion. Probably. Not fear. Not denial. Acceptance. The drones opened fire. Blue energy bolts filled the hallway, slicing through the smoke. Humans returned fire at once. The sound of their weapons was loud and violent, echoing through the broken station. One drone exploded, spinning into pieces. Another crashed into the wall. A blast hit near Kaeldar, throwing him backward. He hit the floor hard, his vision flashing white. His ears rang. When his sight cleared, he saw Mason standing in the open, firing without pause. "Mason, take cover!" Kaeldar shouted. Mason did not move. He advanced. Each step was slow and steady. Shots tore into his armor. Warning lights flashed across his suit. Still, he moved forward, firing again and again. Alvarez followed him, shouting something Kaeldar could not hear. Other humans joined, pushing into the storm of fire as if the danger did not matter. Kaeldar forced himself upright. He fired his own weapon, but his movements felt weak compared to the humans. His hands trembled. His thoughts raced. Why were they doing this? Another explosion rocked the station. The floor cracked. A section of the ceiling collapsed, sending debris floating through the air. One human was hit, his body spinning away. Another grabbed him, pulling him back without hesitation. The enemy drones hesitated. Kaeldar noticed it then. The drones were adjusting their formation, backing away slightly. They had expected fear. They had expected retreat. They did not expect humans running toward death. Mason reached the center of the hallway. He slammed a device onto the floor. Kaeldar's translator identified it as a human demolition charge. "Mason!" Kaeldar shouted. "If that explodes, you will not escape." Mason looked down at the device, then back at Kaeldar. He smiled just a little. "Make it count," he said. The charge detonated. Light swallowed everything. Kaeldar was thrown into the wall. His armor screamed warnings. Systems failed. For a moment he thought he was dead. When the light faded, the hallway was gone. Where it had been was now open space. Stars burned cold and bright beyond the torn hull. Pieces of the station drifted away, spinning slowly. The enemy drones were gone. So was Mason. Kaeldar pushed himself off the wall, gasping. He looked around, searching for survivors. Alvarez floated nearby, unconscious but alive. Two other humans clung to a support beam, breathing heavily. No one spoke. The silence returned, deeper now. Kaeldar stared at the empty space where Mason had been. His mind struggled to understand what he had witnessed. Mason had known the outcome. He had seen it clearly, and he had stepped forward anyway. The station shuddered again. Structural failure warnings lit up across Kaeldar's display. "We have minutes," Kaeldar said quietly. "We must leave." The humans nodded. No arguments, no complaints. As they moved toward the evacuation route, Kaeldar felt something unfamiliar twist inside him. It was not just grief. It was not just fear. It was awe. He had fought enemies stronger than humans, smarter, better armed. None of them had done what Mason did. As they reached the escape corridor, Kaeldar looked back one last time at the stars beyond the broken station. Somewhere out there, enemy fleets still waited. Plans were still being made. Wars were still being calculated. They did not understand. Kaeldar understood now. True terror was not the sound of weapons or the sight of destruction. It was not numbers or firepower. True terror was a species that could look at certain death, accept it, and step forward anyway. The escape craft launched just as the station finally tore itself apart. Kaeldar watched the explosion bloom behind them, silent and vast. He closed his eyes. This was only the beginning, and the galaxy was not ready for what humans would become when pushed this far. The days after the station's destruction felt unreal to Kaeldar. The human evacuation ship drifted through Alliance space, its engines quiet, its lights dimmed to save power. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of burned metal, medical chemicals, and exhaustion. Survivors rested wherever they could, strapped to walls or lying on the floor. Some slept, some stared into nothing. Kaeldar sat alone near the rear of the ship, his armor removed, his skin still marked with dark bruises from the battle. His mind kept returning to the same image. Mason stepping forward, Mason smiling, Mason disappearing into light. Kaeldar had seen soldiers die before. Death was part of war. It was expected, planned for, but this felt different. A human medic floated past, checking life signs on the wounded. She stopped near Kaeldar and offered him a small container of water. "You should drink," she said. Kaeldar accepted it and nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated, then spoke again. "You were close to Sergeant Mason, weren't you?" Kaeldar paused. "We fought together," he replied. "Only briefly." The medic's mouth tightened. That was enough. She pushed off and moved on. Kaeldar watched her go. The humans did not hide their loss. Some cried quietly. Others clenched their fists and said nothing. A few laughed too loudly at small jokes, as if sound alone could keep the silence away. On Kaeldar's homeworld, grief was private, controlled, shown only in ritual. Here, grief lived openly in every movement. The ship docked at an Alliance forward base hours later. As the airlock opened, Kaeldar expected order, commands, careful planning. Instead, he heard shouting. Alliance officers crowded the docking bay, their voices sharp with anger and confusion. Screens displayed the wreckage of the destroyed station, frozen images of drifting metal and bodies. "This was not the plan," one commander snapped. "The humans acted without approval. They destroyed a strategic asset," another said. "The loss is unacceptable." Kaeldar listened, stunned. He stepped forward. "They saved the fleet," he said. "The enemy breach would have spread. That station was already lost." The commanders turned their eyes on him. "You are not human," one said coldly. You do not understand their thinking. Kaeldar felt heat rise inside him. That is exactly the problem, he replied. None of you do. Before the argument could continue, human officers entered the bay. Their uniforms were stained, their faces tired. A tall woman with silver hair stepped forward. Her rank markings showed she was in command. Report complete, she said. Casualties logged. Survivors accounted for. One Alliance commander gestured sharply. Your unit disobeyed orders. The woman met his gaze without blinking. Orders assumed the enemy would behave as predicted. They did not. You sacrificed a station, the commander said. She nodded once. Yes. There was no excuse in her voice. No apology. Kaeldar realized then that humans did not fear judgment the way other species did. They accepted responsibility fully, even when it meant blame. The Alliance command delayed further discussion. Repairs, medical care, and debriefings followed. Kaeldar was assigned temporary quarters near the human section of the base. That night he could not rest. He replayed the battle again and again. The calm voices, the laughter, the charge. Eventually, he rose and followed the quiet sounds of movement down the corridor. He found a small room where humans had gathered. There were no weapons, no armor. Only dim lights and a simple symbol on the wall. A remembrance space. Mason's name was displayed among others. No long speech. No praise. Just names. Alvarez stood near the wall, her arm wrapped in bandages. She noticed Kaeldar and gave a tired nod. You can stay, she said. Kaeldar moved closer, uncertain. Is this a ritual? Alvarez considered the question. Not really. It's just where we remember. Do you believe Mason's death was necessary? Kaeldar asked. She looked at the name on the wall. I believe Mason chose. That answer unsettled him more than any other. Days passed. The enemy did not retreat. Instead, they adapted. New tactics appeared. Faster ships. Stronger shields. The Alliance struggled to respond. Humans did not. Kaeldar was reassigned to a joint task force with human units. This time, he was not an observer. He was a participant. Before the next mission, Kaeldar watched humans prepare. They checked weapons carefully, shared quiet words, adjusted each other's armor. Some wrote short messages and sealed them away. Kaeldar approached Alvarez. Do you expect not to return? He asked. She shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. That uncertainty does not trouble you? She smiled faintly. It does. We just don't let it stop us. The mission briefing was short, direct, brutal. The enemy held a shipyard hidden inside a debris field. The Alliance wanted a clean strike. Humans proposed something else. We go in loud, the commander said. We draw fire. We force them to respond fast. Then we break them. Kaeldar felt unease ripple through him. That will cost lives. The commander nodded. Yes. There was no joy in the answer. The battle began hours later. Human ships surged forward, engines burning bright. Enemy fire lit up the darkness. Explosions bloomed like violent stars. Kaeldar fought beside them again. He felt fear claw at him, sharp and constant. Yet the humans moved with purpose. When plans failed, they adapted instantly. When losses came, they pressed on harder. At one point, Kaeldar's ship took heavy damage. Systems failed. Power dropped. A human vessel moved into position, shielding them. You'll get crushed, Kaeldar warned over comms. A human voice answered calmly. That's the idea. The enemy shipyard burned by the end of the battle. Victory was declared. But Kaeldar did not feel relief. He saw the cost. The empty seats. The silent screens. Back at base, Alliance leaders spoke of strategy and numbers. Human leaders spoke of names. Kaeldar realized something was changing inside him. Fear still existed, but it was no longer directed only at the enemy. He feared what humans were willing to become if the war continued. Not because they were cruel, but because they were capable of enduring anything. As Kaeldar prepared for the next deployment, he looked out at the stars beyond the base windows. Mason's words echoed in his mind. Make it count. Kaeldar understood now. This war would not end with balance or compromise. It would end when humans decided there was nothing left to give. And that realization filled him with a deeper, colder fear than any enemy fleet ever could. The next battle did not begin with alarms or explosions. It began with silence. Kaeldar noticed it first while stationed aboard the human assault carrier moving toward the frontier line. The ship was large yet quiet. Too quiet. Human soldiers moved through the corridors with purpose, but there was little talking. No jokes. No music. They were focused. Kaeldar stood near the observation window, watching distant stars slide past. He had learned enough human expressions to recognize the tension in their faces. This was not fear before combat. It was something heavier. Preparation. Alvarez approached him, her arm healed enough to return to duty. She handed him a small data pad. Updated briefing, she said. Kaeldar scanned it. The enemy had changed tactics again. Instead of large fleets, they now used scattered kill zones, hidden weapons platforms, and traps designed to break morale. This is clever, Kaeldar said. They aim to exhaust us. Alvarez nodded. They think we'll slow down. Kaeldar looked at her. Will you? She met his gaze. No. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Outside, a dark region of space unfolded, filled with debris and ruined vessels. Old battlefields. Forgotten wars. This place is wrong, Kaeldar muttered. That's why they chose it, a human voice said behind him. The commander entered the deck, her silver hair pulled tight. Enemy expects caution. We won't give it to them. Kaeldar felt unease coil in his chest. Humans had learned the enemy's patterns, just as the enemy had learned theirs. This was no longer a simple contest of strength. This was adaptation. The first attack came without warning. Energy beams struck the carrier's shields from multiple angles. The ship rocked violently. Alarms screamed to life. Enemy platforms activated. Someone shouted. Human ships responded instantly, spreading out, firing back, maneuvering through the debris field with dangerous precision. Kaeldar was thrown against a bulkhead as the carrier took another hit. He forced himself upright and followed Alvarez toward their assigned position. The corridor lights flickered. Smoke filled the air. They're everywhere, Kaeldar said, struggling to keep balance. Good, Alvarez replied. That means they're nervous. Kaeldar did not understand how she could say that. Then the humans launched. Boarding pods fired from the carrier like bullets, smashing into hidden enemy platforms. Kaeldar watched the screens in disbelief. Humans were not just attacking. They were invading. They're boarding? He asked. In the middle of crossfire? That's the plan. Kaeldar felt his heart's race. This was madness. No species boarded enemy structures under full fire. It was too costly, too unpredictable. Humans did it anyway. Their pod slammed into an enemy platform. The impact was brutal. Kaeldar nearly blacked out. When the hatch blew open, the air outside rushed in violently. Move! Alvarez shouted. They pushed into the platform, weapons raised. Enemy defenders fired wildly, surprised and unprepared. Humans moved fast, aggressive, precise. Kaeldar fought beside them, his fear screaming at him to hide, to retreat. Instead, he advanced. He watched humans take hits and keep moving. He watched them pull wounded comrades to safety under fire. He watched them shout warnings, encouragement, anger. One human fell, struck through the chest. Another stopped, grabbed his hand, and pressed something into it before pushing forward again. Kaeldar realized what it was. A detonator. The platform shook as charges were placed. Humans moved deeper, drawing defenders toward them, forcing the enemy to react. Why don't they pull back? Kaeldar asked Alvarez, breathless. She fired, then answered. Because if we hesitate, they regroup. The platform exploded moments later. Kaeldar barely made it back to the pod before the structure tore itself apart. As they launched away, he saw 3 other platforms detonating in sequence. The enemy formation broke. The battle raged on for hours. Human losses mounted. So did enemy losses. By the end, the debris field burned with scattered fires and drifting wreckage. The enemy withdrew, leaving behind silence and ruin. The humans had won again, but something felt wrong. Back aboard the carrier, Kaeldar saw the aftermath clearly. Medical bays overflowed. Bodies were covered and moved quietly. No cheers followed this victory. Kaeldar approached the commander. "They are learning," he said. "The enemy. They will adapt again." She nodded. "So will we." "That path has no end," Kaeldar replied. "Each step costs more." The commander looked at him carefully. "War always does." Later, Kaeldar walked the corridors alone. He passed groups of humans sitting together, silent, hands stained with blood and oil. Some stared at the floor. Some stared at walls. None looked surprised. He entered another remembrance space. New names had been added. Too many. Kaeldar felt something break inside him. He had once believed terror came from overwhelming force, from weapons beyond understanding. Now he saw it differently. Terror came from refusal to stop. Humans did not retreat when logic said they should. They did not slow when pain demanded rest. They did not surrender when fear begged them to. They endured. That endurance made them unstoppable. And yet, Kaeldar saw the cost written on every face. Humans carried their dead with them, invisible weight pulling at their shoulders. The enemy did not understand this. They believed pressure would break humanity. Kaeldar knew better now. Pressure only sharpened them. As the fleet prepared for the next jump, Kaeldar returned to the observation window. He watched stars blur into lines as the engines charged. He wondered how long humans could keep going. And more importantly, what would happen when they decided they were done holding back. The thought chilled him deeper than the vacuum outside. The war was changing, and humans were becoming something the galaxy had never faced before. The war did not slow after that battle. It accelerated. Kaeldar began to lose track of time. Days blended together, marked only by jumps through space and the rhythm of combat. The fleet moved from one contested system to another, always one step ahead of collapse, always one mistake away from disaster. Humans remained at the front of every major push. Kaeldar noticed how other species reacted to this. Alien crews watched human ships with a mix of respect and fear. When humans arrived, morale rose. When humans were ordered elsewhere, uncertainty spread like sickness. Humans had become a signal. Where they fought, the line held. Where they stood, the enemy hesitated. Kaeldar fought beside them again and again. Each time, he learned something new about what war did to humans, and what humans allowed war to do to them. During a brief lull between engagements, Kaeldar found Alvarez sitting alone in the cargo bay. She was cleaning her weapon slowly, carefully. Her movements were precise, almost gentle. "You are injured," Kaeldar said, noticing a slight stiffness in her shoulder. She shrugged. "Everyone is." "That is not an answer." She smiled faintly. "It's the only one we have." Kaeldar hesitated, then asked the question that had been pressing on him for days. "Why do you continue, after so much loss?" Alvarez stopped cleaning the weapon. She looked up at him, eyes tired but clear. "Because if we don't," she said, "someone else pays the price." Kaeldar did not reply. He had heard similar words before, spoken by leaders and politicians. But from her, they sounded different. They were not justification. They were fact. The next mission proved it. The enemy had begun attacking evacuation convoys, civilian ships, unarmed transports carrying refugees from contested worlds. Alliance forces argued over defense priorities. Humans did not wait. They diverted immediately. Kaeldar joined the escort group, his unease growing as they entered the danger zone. Long-range scans showed multiple enemy signatures hiding among debris and asteroid shadows. "This is a trap," Kaeldar warned. "Yes," the human commander replied, "and they expect us to hesitate." The convoy came under fire within minutes. Enemy ships burst from hiding, targeting the slow civilian transports first. Explosions ripped through empty space, dangerously close to the evac ships. Human escorts moved without pause. They placed themselves directly between enemy fire and the civilians. Shields flared and failed. Hulls cracked. Engines burned. Kaeldar watched in disbelief as one human frigate deliberately rammed an enemy ship that was lining up a shot on a transport. The collision tore both vessels apart. The transport escaped. Kaeldar felt something twist violently inside him. "That ship," he said over comms, voice shaking. "They chose that." A human voice answered, calm and steady. "They chose the convoy." The battle was short and brutal. When it ended, all civilian ships were intact. 3 human vessels were gone. Back aboard the carrier, Kaeldar saw the human survivors gather again. No cheers, no speeches, just quiet acknowledgement. One soldier placed small metal markers into a container. Kaeldar recognized them now. Dog tags. He approached the soldier. "Do you believe this loss was acceptable?" The soldier looked at him for a long moment. "No," he said, "but it was necessary." Kaeldar struggled with that answer. His species calculated acceptable loss through probability and outcome. Humans measured it differently. They measured it in faces, in names. As the war dragged on, Kaeldar began to notice changes in human behavior. Not weakness, something harder. They slept less. They spoke less. Laughter became rare, but not absent. When it appeared, it was sharp and brief, like a flash of light in darkness. Some humans began to carry small personal items into battle. Photos, symbols, simple tokens. Kaeldar asked Alvarez about it once. "It reminds us why we're still here," she said. "Does it not make loss harder?" Kaeldar asked. She considered. "Yes, but it also makes quitting impossible." That answer frightened him. The enemy noticed the change too. Intercepted transmissions revealed new terms used to describe humans. Not soldiers, not warriors. They called them inevitables. Kaeldar read the reports with growing dread. The enemy was afraid, not of human weapons, but of their persistence. Every tactic the enemy used to break morale failed. Ambushes only sharpened human responses. Heavy losses only fueled determination. Yet Kaeldar saw the cost clearly now. He watched humans flinch at sudden sounds. He saw their hands shake before battle, then steady as weapons were raised. He heard them whisper names before charging forward. Humans were not fearless. They were enduring fear. That distinction mattered. During one engagement, Kaeldar was nearly killed. An enemy blast breached his armor, sending him spinning into open space. His systems failed. Darkness crept in. A human grabbed him. The force nearly tore them both apart. But the human held on, thrusters firing wildly as they pulled Kaeldar back towards safety. Inside the airlock, Kaeldar collapsed, gasping. "You should have let go," he said weakly. "Your survival chance would have increased." The human removed his helmet. His face was young, eyes wide, breathing uneven. "Didn't feel right," he said simply. That moment stayed with Kaeldar. Later, as repairs were made and the fleet regrouped, Kaeldar stood before a tactical display showing projected casualty curves. Human projections were worse, far worse. Alliance analysts recommended limiting human deployment to preserve long-term effectiveness. When Kaeldar heard this, something unexpected happened. He felt anger. "They are not resources," he said sharply. "They are people." The analysts stared at him in surprise. Kaeldar realized he had begun thinking like a human. That realization frightened him almost as much as the war itself. That night, Kaeldar stood alone in the observation chamber, watching distant stars flicker. He thought of Mason, of the frigate that rammed the enemy, of the human who saved him without hesitation. He understood now why humans inspired terror. Not because they were violent, but because they would endure pain, loss, and fear far beyond what logic allowed. And if pushed far enough, Kaeldar suspected they would accept destruction itself rather than allow others to fall. The war was no longer about territory or power. It was about limits. And Kaeldar feared the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's limits were far deeper and far darker than anyone had ever imagined. The moment that changed everything came without warning. The fleet was regrouping near a quiet system far from the main front. Ships were damaged. Crews were exhausted. Even the humans moved slower now, their faces drawn tight with fatigue. Kaeldar hoped for the first time that the war might pause. It did not. The alert reached them as a broken signal, distorted and weak. At first, Alliance sensors dismissed it as debris noise. Human systems did not. They boosted the signal and played it across the command deck. It was a civilian broadcast. The image shook violently. Smoke filled the frame. A human woman held the recorder, her face streaked with ash and blood. Behind her, buildings burned. The sky glowed red. "If anyone can hear this," she said, her voice breaking. "They're here. They're killing everyone. Please." The signal cut off. Silence followed. Kaeldar felt cold spread through his body. "Which world?" he asked. A human officer answered quietly. "Kareth Colony. Civilian only. No military presence." Kaeldar knew the name. A small human settlement. Far from supply lines. Far from defenses. Safe. Or so they had believed. Alliance command reacted slowly. Data had to be confirmed. Enemy intent analyzed. Risk assessed. Humans did not wait. Kaeldar watched the change happen in real time. Human commanders stopped asking questions. They stopped debating options. Their voices lost all warmth. Orders were given. Sharp. Final. "All available human units, prepare to jump," the silver-haired commander said. "We are going now." Alliance representatives protested. "This could be a diversion. We cannot abandon." "We are not abandoning anyone," the commander replied. "We are responding." The fleet split. Human ships broke formation and jumped immediately, engines burning at unsafe levels. Kaeldar's ship went with them. The jump was rough. Systems screamed. Several ships dropped out early, damaged but still moving. When they arrived, they were too late. Kareth Colony was gone. The planet's surface burned from orbit to ground. Cities reduced to glowing scars. The atmosphere filled with debris and ash. No enemy ships remained. Kaeldar stared at the display, unable to speak. Human crews stared too. No one moved. No one spoke. Kaeldar expected shouting, rage, grief. Instead, he felt something far worse. Stillness. The commander's voice broke the silence. It was calm, almost quiet. "Scan for survivors." There were none. Hours passed as data was gathered. The enemy had not attacked for resources or strategy. There was no military gain. They had done it to send a message. Kaeldar understood the message clearly. This is what happens when you resist. He looked at the humans around him and felt a deep, sinking fear. They were not grieving. They were changing. In the days that followed, human behavior shifted in ways Kaeldar had never seen. There were no remembrance gatherings. No walls of names. Humans stopped talking about home. They trained harder, longer. Rest became optional. Pain became ignored. Kaeldar saw soldiers push through injuries that should have removed them from duty. Medics argued. Soldiers refused. "We're fine," they said. Later. Later never came. Strategy meetings became colder. Human plans no longer focused on holding lines or protecting zones. They focused on ending the enemy. Completely. Kaeldar attended one such meeting. The room was dim. Maps filled every surface, marked with enemy positions, supply routes, and civilian targets. Civilian targets. Kaeldar felt his breath catch. "These locations," he said carefully, "they are population centers." "Yes," the commander replied. "You intend to strike them?" The commander looked at him. "The enemy used civilians as a weapon. We will remove that weapon. That will kill millions," Kaeldar said. "So did Kareth," she answered. There was no anger in her voice. No hatred. Only certainty. Kaeldar realized then that humans had crossed a line. Not into cruelty. Into resolve. The next operation began without announcement. Human fleets struck deep into enemy territory. Not with overwhelming force, but with relentless precision. Shipyards, command centers, communication hubs. Every strike cut something vital. Enemy resistance grew desperate. Counterattacks failed. Traps were anticipated and dismantled. Kaeldar fought alongside humans again, but something felt different now. There was no hesitation, no pause to assess losses. If a plan failed, it was replaced instantly by something harsher. In one battle, an enemy fleet attempted to retreat. Humans pursued them into unstable space, where gravity tore ships apart. "This region is lethal," Kaeldar warned. "We risk losing everything." The human captain responded without hesitation. "So do they." The enemy fleet did not escape. Neither did two human ships. No one commented. Kaeldar felt sick. He confronted Alvarez after the battle. She sat alone, staring at nothing, her hands clenched. "This path," Kaeldar said. "It will consume you." She looked at him slowly. Her eyes were empty in a way that frightened him. "They already consumed our children," she said. "This is what's left." Kaeldar had no answer. Enemy transmissions became frantic. Appeals, threats, warnings. One broadcast reached the human command deck. An enemy leader appeared on screen, his form trembling. "You are becoming monsters," he said. "This will not end well." The commander listened, expression unreadable. "This ended when you burned our world," she replied, and cut the signal. Kaeldar felt a deep, crushing weight settle in his chest. He finally understood. True terror was not humans fighting to protect. It was humans deciding there was nothing left to protect, only something to end. As the fleet prepared for the next phase of the war, Kaeldar looked at the humans around him. They moved like shadows now, quiet, efficient, unstoppable. He wondered if peace could ever reach them again. And for the first time since the war began, Kaeldar felt fear not of the enemy, but of what the humans would become if nothing stopped them. The galaxy had pushed them too far, and now there would be no gentle ending. The final phase of the war did not begin with an announcement. There was no speech, no declaration, no warning sent across the stars. It began when the human fleets changed direction. Kaeldar noticed it while studying the navigation charts. Human ships were no longer responding to alliance suggestions. They were not asking for approval or coordination. They moved as one body, turning toward the heart of enemy territory. "This region is forbidden," an alliance strategist warned over comms. "It is too deep. Supply lines will fail." A human admiral responded calmly. "We won't need long supply lines." Kaeldar felt unease tighten inside him. He understood what that meant. This was not a campaign. It was an ending. The first systems fell quickly. Enemy defenses collapsed under sudden, focused strikes. Humans did not spread their forces thin. They punched through key locations, cutting communication and command before resistance could form. Enemy fleets rushed to intercept. Humans met them head-on. There was no retreat now. In one battle, Kaeldar watched a human carrier continue firing even as its engines burned and its hull tore open. It held position long enough for smaller ships to escape, then detonated itself in a controlled blast that wiped out half the enemy fleet. Kaeldar stared at the sensor data, stunned. "That ship could have withdrawn," he said. A human officer beside him answered quietly. "But then the others wouldn't have made it." Losses mounted on both sides. But unlike earlier battles, humans did not slow. Each loss seemed to harden them further, stripping away anything soft or uncertain. The enemy began to break. Interceptors fled at the sight of human signals. Defensive stations powered down rather than face boarding actions. Entire systems surrendered without a fight. Enemy broadcasts changed tone. First came threats, then anger, then fear. Kaeldar intercepted one transmission meant for enemy civilians. The voice trembled as it spoke. "The humans are coming. Evacuate if you can. Hide if you cannot." Kaeldar's breath caught. That was when he understood the balance had shifted completely. The humans reached the enemy core worlds faster than anyone expected. These planets were heavily defended, layered with weapons designed to stop fleets. Humans did not attack all at once. They waited. That waiting frightened Kael'thar more than any charge. Human fleets surrounded the worlds and held position. Days passed, then weeks. Enemy leaders sent messages, demanding negotiations. Alliance leaders urged restraint. Humans remained silent. Kael'thar attended a human command meeting during that time. The room was dark, lit only by star maps and red tactical symbols. "What are we waiting for?" Kael'thar asked carefully. The silver-haired commander looked at him. "For them to understand." "Understand what?" "That this ends now." The attacks began without warning. Human forces targeted power grids, orbital platforms, and planetary defenses in perfect sequence. No wasted motion. No unnecessary fire. Enemy weapons went dark. Then the humans sent a message. It was simple. "Stand down. This war is over." The enemy refused. They launched everything they had left. The final battle was the largest Kael'thar had ever witnessed. Space burned with fire and light. Ships collided, exploded, vanished. Communications dissolved into chaos. Kael'thar fought until his armor screamed warnings and his muscles failed. He barely noticed the pain. He saw humans fight with terrifying calm. They coordinated without words. They sacrificed without hesitation. One human pilot rammed an enemy command ship at full speed, cutting the enemy leadership apart in a single moment. Another unit boarded a planetary defense station and held it long enough for orbital strikes to disable the surface cannons. When the smoke cleared, the enemy fleets were gone. Destroyed or surrendered. The war was effectively over. Kael'thar felt relief wash through him. It was short-lived. The humans did not celebrate. They moved to the surface of the enemy homeworld. Alliance leaders protested. "Occupation will cause chaos. Let diplomacy." Human forces deployed anyway. Kael'thar followed, dread heavy in his chest. On the ground, enemy civilians watched in fear as human soldiers marched through their cities. Weapons were raised but not fired. Humans took control of key locations quickly and efficiently. No looting, no cruelty, just control. Kael'thar approached a group of human soldiers standing guard near a government complex. Their faces were blank, their eyes distant. "What happens now?" he asked. A soldier replied without emotion. "Now they can't hurt anyone else." Enemy leaders were captured within days. Trials were brief. Evidence was overwhelming. Sentences were final. When the last judgment was delivered, Kael'thar felt a strange emptiness settle over him. The war was done. Yet the humans did not seem at peace. They remained alert, watchful, as if expecting something else to come. Kael'thar walked through a human camp that night. Fires burned low. Soldiers sat quietly, cleaning weapons they would no longer need. Alvarez sat alone, staring into the flames. "It's over," Kael'thar said. She nodded. "For them. For you as well," he said. "You won." She looked up at him. Her eyes were tired beyond words. "We survived," she said. "That's not the same thing." Kael'thar had no reply. In the days that followed, humans began withdrawing from enemy worlds. Control was transferred to Alliance forces. Reconstruction plans were discussed. Humans showed little interest. They returned to their ships, to silence. Kael'thar realized something painful then. Humans had not fought for victory. They had fought for closure. And closure had come at a terrible cost. As the fleet prepared to depart, Kael'thar stood once more at the observation window. The enemy homeworld turned slowly below, scarred but intact. He thought of Mason, of Kareth Colony, of the countless names never spoken aloud. The galaxy would remember this war as a victory. Kael'thar would remember it as a warning. Humans could be allies beyond measure. But if pushed too far, if cornered with nothing left to lose, they would become something unstoppable. Not out of hate, out of resolve. And that, Kael'thar knew, was the purest form of terror the universe would ever face. The war ended quietly. There was no final explosion, no great celebration that echoed across space. The human fleets withdrew system by system, leaving behind silence, wreckage, and a galaxy unsure how to breathe again. Kaeldar returned with them, though he no longer felt like the same being who had first stood beside humans on the dying station. His body had healed. His mind had not. The Alliance convened its council on a neutral world untouched by war. Tall chambers of glass and stone reflected starlight, meant to symbolize unity and calm. Kaeldar stood before the gathered representatives, his posture straight, his voice steady. He had been asked to give an assessment, not of the enemy, of humanity. "The war is over," an elder counselor said. "The threat has been removed. We must decide how to move forward." Kaeldar looked around the chamber. He saw relief on many faces, satisfaction on others. He did not share it. "You believe this ended with victory," Kaeldar said. "It did not. It ended with exhaustion." Murmurs spread. A counselor leaned forward. "Explain." Kaeldar drew a slow breath. "Humans did not win because they were stronger, or smarter, or better armed. They won because they refused to stop." Images appeared above the chamber. Battles, burning stations, broken worlds, human ships charging through fire. "They felt fear," Kaeldar continued. "They felt pain. They felt loss deeper than most species can survive. And they kept going." One counselor frowned. "That makes them dangerous." "Yes," Kaeldar replied. "And precious." Silence followed. "They are dangerous," he said again, "because they do not love war. They hate it. They endure it only when forced. But when they decide it must end, they will pay any price to finish it." Another counselor spoke. "Are you suggesting we fear our allies?" Kaeldar shook his head. "I am suggesting we respect them." The council ended without argument, but Kaeldar knew his warning would echo long after the chamber emptied. Humans returned to their worlds slowly, not with parades but with quiet landings. Ships touched down carrying soldiers who had left as individuals and returned as something heavier. Kaeldar visited one such world at the invitation of the human command. Earth. From orbit it looked peaceful. Blue oceans, white clouds, green land. It did not look like the home of terror. On the surface, Kaeldar walked among humans rebuilding what the war had strained. Factories restarted. Homes were repaired. Children played under open skies. Felt unreal. He visited a simple memorial outside a city. No statues of heroes. No weapons carved in stone. Only names. Thousands of them. Humans came and went quietly. Some placed flowers. Some touched the stone and left without a word. Kaeldar found Alvarez there. She stood still, reading names. Her uniform was gone. She wore simple clothing, her hair tied back loosely. "You came home," Kaeldar said. She nodded. "I think so. Do you feel at peace?" he asked. She was silent for a long moment. "I feel tired." They walked together through the memorial. Kaeldar noticed how humans treated the space. With care. With respect. With sorrow but not despair. "You could have stopped," Kaeldar said quietly. "After Kareth. After the final battles. You could have stepped back." Alvarez stopped walking. She turned to face him. "If we had," she said, "they would have done it again. Somewhere else. To someone else." Kaeldar nodded. "And now?" "Now," she said, "maybe no one will." That answer stayed with him. As weeks passed, Kaeldar observed humans from a distance. The hardness he had seen during the war faded slowly. Laughter returned, cautious at first, then warmer. Music played again. Stories were told. But something had changed forever. Humans remembered. They carried the war inside them, not as hunger for violence, but as a boundary. Kaeldar realized that was the key. Humans were not aggressive by nature. They were protective. Push them and they would retreat. Corner them and they would endure. Destroy what they loved and they would end you. That was the line. Before leaving Earth, Kaeldar was invited to speak to a group of human officers, veterans of the war. They sat in a simple hall, listening without interruption. "You frighten the galaxy," Kaeldar told them honestly. Some smiled faintly. Others did not react. "You frighten them not because you seek power," he continued, But because you are willing to face hell so others do not have to. He paused. That makes you the greatest shield the galaxy has ever known. No one applauded. They did not need to. When Kaeldar departed, he looked back at Earth one final time. He felt something close to hope. Years later, long after repairs were complete and borders stabilized, new civilizations would ask about the war. They would ask who won. Those who had been there would answer carefully. They would not speak first of fleets or battles. They would speak of humans standing their ground when logic said to run. Of humans charging forward when survival said to hide. Of humans who accepted terror, carried it, and used it to protect others. Kaeldar would record his final report in the Alliance archives with a simple conclusion. Humanity is not dangerous because it loves war. Humanity is dangerous because it understands the cost of peace and is willing to pay it. The galaxy would remember that lesson. And if it was wise, it would never force humans to teach it again.